If you love gripping stories that pull you in and don't let go, you're in the right place. This is Mr. Gray's Stories. Houston's International Airport was loud that afternoon. Suitcases rolled across polished floors. Departure announcements echoed overhead. Travelers hurried past security lines, checking watches, clutching boarding passes, trying not to miss their flights. Most people were focused on their own schedules, but a small moment near one of the security lanes quietly drew attention. A tall man in a tailored jacket stepped forward and lifted a carry-on bag onto the conveyor belt. The woman beside him adjusted the strap of her purse and offered a grateful smile. "Thanks," she said. "No problem," he replied calmly. To anyone passing by, it looked like a simple gesture. Just a man helping a colleague through airport security. But this was not just any traveler. The man was Nicole, a billionaire entrepreneur known across Texas for building one of the fastest-growing logistics companies in the country. People in line began whispering. Some recognized him immediately. Others simply noticed the confident way he moved, the quiet respect people seemed to give him without question. Nicole took the bag once it came through the scanner and handed it back to the woman beside him. She thanked him again. And that's when something unexpected happened. The soft squeak of stroller wheels approached from behind. 2 tiny giggles followed. Nicole turned his head slightly. At first, he thought he recognized the sound. But when he looked over his shoulder, he froze, because walking calmly toward him was his wife, Sharon, and inside the stroller in front of her, 2 8-month-old twins kicked their feet happily. Sharon stopped a few steps away. Her expression was calm, gentle, almost amused. Not angry, not shocked, just quietly watching. Around them, travelers slowed down. Some glanced at Nicole. Some glanced at the woman beside him, and then at Sharon. The moment looked like the beginning of a scandal. But Sharon didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse anyone. Instead, she smiled, a soft, knowing smile, the kind that made everyone nearby pause, because sometimes the most powerful reaction is the one no one expects. Now pause for a moment, because scenes like this happen in real life more often than people admit. A moment appears in front of you, and your mind immediately fills in the story. You see something that doesn't look right. 2 people standing a little too close. A quiet conversation that suddenly stops when someone arrives. A gesture that seems harmless, but feels suspicious when viewed from the outside. And in seconds, the mind begins racing. Questions form instantly. What's really going on here? How long has this been happening? Was I the only one who didn't know? But here's the truth. Most people learn too late. What we think we see and what is actually happening are not always the same thing. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever witnessed a moment that looked completely wrong at first glance, only to discover later that you misunderstood everything? Maybe it was a conversation you overheard halfway through. Maybe it was a message taken out of context. Maybe it was someone you love standing in a situation that looked impossible to explain. In moments like that, emotions can move faster than reason. Suspicion arrives before understanding. Judgment arrives before truth. And relationships, even strong ones, can be damaged in a single reaction. That's what made this moment inside Houston's airport so unusual. Because when Sharon saw her billionaire husband standing beside another woman, her reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't panic. It wasn't confrontation. It was something far more powerful. Patience. And patience, when used at the right moment, can reveal truths most people never get the chance to see. Now think about this carefully. You walk into a crowded airport. People everywhere. Announcements echoing overhead. Travelers rushing past with suitcases. And across the security line, you spot your spouse. But they're not alone. They're standing beside another woman. Close enough to speak quietly. Close enough that he's lifting her luggage onto the scanner, helping her gather her things on the other side. They look comfortable, familiar, like they've been traveling together. In that moment, your heart starts beating faster. Questions flood your mind all at once. Why didn't he mention this? Who is she? How long have they been working together like this? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, am I about to learn something I don't want to know? Most people in that situation react instantly. Voices rise. Accusations fly. Assumptions take control before the truth ever gets a chance to speak. But Sharon did something very few people manage to do. She slowed down. She looked at the entire moment carefully. At Nicole, at the woman beside him, at the way the situation unfolded in front of her. And instead of letting suspicion take the lead, she chose something much harder: trust. Because sometimes the strongest relationships are not the ones without doubt. They are the ones where people choose understanding before judgment. And Sharon's choice in that airport terminal was about to reveal something none of those travelers could have guessed. Because what Sharon did next didn't expose betrayal. It didn't create a dramatic confrontation in the middle of the airport. And it didn't turn into the kind of public scene people often expect in moments like that. Instead, Sharon's calm reaction revealed something far more powerful. It revealed trust, the kind of trust that takes years to build, the kind of trust that survives pressure, stress, and misunderstanding. But even more surprising than that, the woman standing beside Nicole wasn't who most people would assume she was. And the reason Nicole had been traveling with her had nothing to do with romance. It had everything to do with a secret problem inside his billion-dollar company, a problem involving missing shipments, suspicious financial records, and a betrayal hidden deep within the business he had spent his entire life building. That quiet moment in the airport terminal, with a stroller, 2 laughing babies, and a gentle smile, was about to open the door to a truth none of them expected. A truth that would test loyalty, reveal hidden pressures, and remind everyone involved that real love isn't built on suspicion. It's built on patience, honesty, and the courage to face difficult moments together. But before we step into this story, take a moment to like this video and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Welcome to Mr. Gray Stories. Here, we tell the kind of stories that stay with you, stories that challenge you, comfort you, and sometimes even change you. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. You're exactly where you're meant to be. Texas has a kind of sunlight that feels different from anywhere else. It doesn't rush across the sky. It settles. Late afternoons stretch long across quiet streets, painting sidewalks gold while warm air drifts through open windows. In neighborhoods just outside Houston, life moves with a rhythm that feels steady and familiar. Children ride bicycles along wide sidewalks. Neighbors wave from front porches. Some evenings the smell of barbecue floats slowly through the air, while music hums softly inside living rooms. That was the world Sharon grew up in. Not glamorous, not wealthy, but full of life. Her neighborhood sat about 20 minutes outside downtown Houston, where glass towers gave way to smaller homes with tidy lawns and families who knew each other well. If someone's car broke down, 2 neighbors appeared before the tow truck arrived. If someone had a baby, casseroles filled the kitchen before the parents even asked for help. And every Sunday afternoon, Sharon's family gathered for dinner. Those dinners were loud, not arguments, just the joyful noise of cousins talking over each other, uncles debating sports, and aunties offering opinions about everything from recipes to life choices. At the center of it all was Sharon's mother, a woman who believed strongly in one simple philosophy: peace inside a home matters more than money inside a bank. Sharon heard those words so often growing up that they became part of how she saw the world. Money could solve problems, but it could not replace trust. It could not build patience. And it certainly could not create love where none existed. Her mother made sure Sharon understood that early. Some evenings, when dishes were stacked in the sink and the house finally grew quiet, Sharon would sit at the kitchen table listening to her mother speak about life. Not lectures, just conversations. People chase money like it fixes everything, her mother once told her, while drying plates with a towel. But a house full of tension will make even rich people miserable. Young Sharon had asked a simple question. Then what makes a house peaceful? Her mother smiled softly. Respect, honesty, and choosing kindness even when it's not easy. Sharon carried those words with her as she grew older. At school, she was known as someone people trusted easily, not because she tried to impress anyone, but because she listened carefully before speaking. If 2 friends argued, Sharon was often the person who helped them see each other's side. If someone felt left out, she noticed, she had a natural ability to read emotions quietly. Her cousins joked that Sharon had a built-in radar for people's feelings. But Sharon didn't think of it that way. She simply believed relationships deserved attention. By the time she reached her late 20s, Sharon had built a life rooted in those same values. She worked in community programs that supported young professionals and small business owners trying to build stable futures. It wasn't glamorous work, but it mattered. Helping people organize mentorship events, educational workshops, and networking opportunities allowed her to watch people grow. She liked that. Watching potential turn into confidence. Watching ideas turn into real opportunities. What people often noticed first about Sharon wasn't her intelligence. It was her calm. She spoke clearly, listened carefully, and rarely reacted emotionally before understanding the full picture. Her friends trusted her advice. Her colleagues respected her judgment. But what truly defined Sharon wasn't what she said. It was how she treated people. She didn't care if someone was wealthy or struggling. She spoke to everyone the same way. Direct, warm, respectful, which is why the idea of Sharon eventually marrying a billionaire surprised many people who knew her. Because nothing about Sharon suggested she would chase wealth. She never talked about luxury. She never admired status. Her dreams were simple: a peaceful home, a loving family, and a life where the people around her felt valued. What Sharon didn't know yet was that the value she learned growing up in that quiet Houston neighborhood would one day become the foundation that held a billion-dollar life together. And the man whose world would eventually collide with hers was growing up in a very different corner of Texas. Long before Nicole became known as a billionaire entrepreneur, his life began in a place where wealth was never part of the conversation. He grew up in a small Texas town where people measured success in simpler ways, not by the size of their bank accounts, but by how hard they worked, whether they kept their word, and how they treated the people around them. The town itself was quiet. A few main streets, a handful of family-owned stores, and wide stretches of land where ranches and small businesses kept the local economy moving. Everyone seemed to know everyone, and Nicole's father believed strongly in one rule above all others: if you promise something, you deliver it. There were no long speeches about life lessons in Nicole's house. His father preferred simple statements that carried weight. "Your name is worth more than anything you'll ever own," he told Nicole one afternoon while they repaired a fence line together under the Texas sun. Nicole had been 14 years old at the time, holding a wooden post steady while his father secured it into the ground. "What do you mean?" Nicole asked. His father wiped sweat from his forehead before answering. "It means people should be able to trust your word without asking twice." Nicole nodded slowly. Even at that age, the message stayed with him. Growing up, Nicole watched his father work long hours without complaint. Whether it was repairing equipment, helping neighbors, or finishing a job that stretched later into the evening than expected, the responsibility was always taken seriously. Promises were not suggestions. They were commitments. That mindset shaped Nicole's view of the world. By the time he reached his early 20s, he already understood something many people learn much later in life. Success rarely arrives suddenly. It grows slowly from consistency. While many of his friends chose familiar careers in ranching, construction, or local trade work, Nicole saw a different opportunity emerging: technology. The logistics industry was changing rapidly as companies began relying on digital systems to manage shipping and transportation networks. Nicole saw inefficiencies everywhere: shipments delayed because companies lacked real-time tracking, contracts mismanaged due to outdated systems, businesses losing money simply because communication between suppliers and distributors moved too slowly. Where others saw complicated problems, Nicole saw opportunity. At 23, he launched a small technology logistics company with limited resources and a handful of employees who believed in his vision. The early years were not glamorous. Some investors dismissed his ideas immediately. Others listened politely but declined to take risks on a young entrepreneur without an established reputation. One investor told him bluntly during a meeting, "You're smart, Nicole, but logistics is a crowded industry. Breaking into it will take more than ambition." Nicole responded calmly, "It will take discipline." The investor smiled politely, clearly unconvinced. Nicole left that meeting without funding, but he didn't leave discouraged. He simply returned to work. Month after month, year after year, the company grew gradually. Nicole focused on solving practical problems: improving shipment visibility, reducing delivery delays, creating systems that allowed companies to track supply chains with greater accuracy. Clients who worked with his company noticed the difference quickly. Word spread. Contracts increased. Partnerships expanded beyond Texas. Within a decade, the small startup had transformed into one of the fastest-growing logistics technology companies in the country. Major investors eventually approached him with offers he once struggled to obtain. By the time Nicole turned 35, Financial analysts across the country began recognizing his company as a major force in the industry. And one morning, headlines across several business publications confirmed something that still felt strange to Nicole. He had officially joined the list of America's youngest billionaires. The title brought attention, interviews, public recognition. But privately, Nicole still saw himself the same way he always had, a man responsible for keeping promises. Despite the enormous growth of his company, Nicole maintained the same habits his father taught him years earlier. He reviewed contracts carefully. He expected honesty from his leadership team. And he believed that integrity inside a company mattered more than rapid expansion, because success built on shaky ground would eventually collapse. And Nicole had spent too many years building his company to let that happen. That commitment to integrity made his reputation strong. Clients trusted him. Employees respected him. Partners believed his word carried weight. But the same values that made Nicole successful also created something else, a deep personal belief in loyalty. When Nicole trusted someone, he trusted them fully, which meant that if someone ever betrayed that trust, the damage would reach far deeper than financial loss. It would strike at the very principles he had built his life around. And the woman who would one day stand beside him through that challenge had not yet entered his life. That meeting was still waiting to happen, at a small community event in Houston, where a microphone refused to work, and a woman named Sharon had already grown slightly annoyed with it. The night Sharon met Nicole began like many other evenings in her work schedule. Busy. The community mentorship event had been planned for weeks. Flyers had circulated across Houston, inviting young entrepreneurs, students, and small business owners to attend a networking program designed to connect experienced professionals with people trying to build their own paths. Sharon had helped organize the entire evening. That meant coordinating volunteers, preparing the meeting hall, greeting guests, and making sure the speakers had everything they needed before the program started. By the time the doors opened, the room buzzed with energy. Rows of chairs filled slowly as attendees arrived, talking about ideas, career goals, and business plans. Some carried notebooks, others carried laptops. A few simply came hoping to learn something useful. At the front of the room stood a podium with a microphone attached, and that microphone had decided to cause problems. Sharon tapped the top of it once. Nothing. She tapped again. Still nothing. She crouched slightly to check the cable connection near the base of the stand. "Come on," she muttered under her breath. A volunteer nearby watched nervously. "Do you want me to get someone from maintenance?" he asked. Sharon shook her head. No, it worked earlier. Something small must be wrong. She pressed the power button again. Silence. Behind her, the door opened quietly as one of the guest speakers arrived. Nicole stepped inside the room without drawing attention to himself. He wore a simple dark jacket and carried himself with the calm confidence of someone accustomed to walking into unfamiliar spaces. Most people in the room had not noticed him yet, but Nicole noticed Sharon immediately. Not because she looked glamorous. She didn't. She looked focused, determined, and slightly annoyed at the microphone that refused to cooperate. Nicole watched her struggle with the equipment for a moment before walking closer. "Need a hand?" he asked. Sharon looked up briefly. Her eyes studied him for a second. "You know how to fix microphones?" she asked. Nicole gave a small shrug. "I know how to follow instructions." Sharon stepped aside and handed the microphone to him. "Be my guest." Nicole turned the device slightly in his hands, examining the switch on the back. Then he pressed a small button. The speakers immediately crackled to life. Sharon blinked. Nicole handed the microphone back to her calmly. "All set." Sharon stared at the device for a moment, before slowly raising her eyes back to him. "Well," she said, folding her arms, "that was impressive." Nicole smiled slightly. "Not really." Sharon raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "I just pushed the power button." For half a second, Sharon looked at him in silence. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real one. "You're kidding." "Nope." Sharon shook her head. "I spent 5 minutes checking the cable and didn't think to check the switch." Nicole nodded sympathetically. Technology likes to humble people. The volunteer nearby chuckled quietly. Sharon extended her hand. "Thank you for saving the evening." Nicole shook her hand. "Happy to help." It was only then that Sharon asked the obvious question. "Are you one of the speakers tonight?" Nicole nodded. "I am." Sharon glanced at the event schedule on the clipboard she carried. Her eyes widened slightly. "Wait, Nicole? That's me. For the first time, Sharon looked at him with more careful attention. The name was familiar. She had seen it during the planning process. Nicole, founder of one of the fastest-growing logistics technology companies in the country. She looked back at him again, then shrugged. Well, Nicole, thank you for fixing the microphone. Nicole chuckled. You're welcome. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden spark that either of them noticed right away. Just a simple conversation between two people standing near a podium before a community event. But Nicole found something about Sharon immediately interesting. She hadn't reacted to his reputation. She hadn't asked questions about his company. She treated him like anyone else who had just walked through the door. And that was unusual. Most people approached Nicole differently once they realized who he was. Some became overly polite. Others tried to impress him. Sharon had done neither. Instead, she had laughed at the situation and moved on. The event began shortly afterward. Nicole delivered his talk about entrepreneurship, discipline, and the importance of keeping promises in business. The audience listened carefully. Some took notes. Others asked questions afterward about building companies and navigating the risks of starting something new. But every once in a while, Nicole noticed Sharon moving through the room, helping guests find seats, organizing materials, and quietly making sure the evening ran smoothly. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She was making sure everyone else had what they needed. After the event ended, people slowly began leaving the hall. Nicole packed his notes into a folder and walked toward the exit. Sharon stood near the door, thanking guests for attending. When Nicole reached her, she smiled. Your talk went well. Thank you. She tilted her head slightly. People seemed inspired. Nicole nodded. That's always the goal. There was a brief pause between them. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Nicole finally said something unexpected. Your microphone troubleshooting was the most memorable part of the evening. Sharon laughed again. I'll try to improve my technical skills. Nicole smiled. I hope you don't. Oh, it made meeting you more interesting. Sharon looked at him curiously. Is that your way of starting conversations with strangers? Only the interesting ones. Sharon shook her head, amused. Well, Nicole, it was nice meeting you. Likewise. And just like that, their paths crossed for the first time. Neither of them realized it yet. But that small moment beside a stubborn microphone had quietly started something important. A connection built not on wealth or status, but on something far simpler. Respect. And sometimes the most meaningful relationships in life begin in moments that feel completely ordinary. Before we continue this story, take a moment to like this video and share in the comments if you've ever met someone who changed your life in a moment you didn't expect. Because for Nicole and Sharon, that moment had just happened. The first few weeks after the mentorship event passed quietly. Nicole and Sharon didn't rush into anything dramatic. Their connection developed in the kind of way that felt natural rather than forced. Nicole invited Sharon to coffee one afternoon after a follow-up meeting related to the community program. What started as a 30-minute conversation stretched into 2 hours. Not because either of them planned it, but because the conversation kept moving easily from one topic to another. Sharon asked thoughtful questions about Nicole's work. Nicole asked about the community projects she helped organize. Neither of them tried to impress the other, and that made their time together feel relaxed. Over the following months, they began spending more time together. Sometimes dinner after work, sometimes long walks through quiet Houston neighborhoods, sometimes simply sitting on a park bench talking about life, family, and future plans. Nicole found something about Sharon refreshing. She wasn't fascinated by his success. She was interested in who he was, and Sharon noticed something about Nicole as well. Despite the enormous company he ran, he carried himself with the calm discipline of someone who never forgot where he came from. Eventually, the moment arrived that Nicole knew would matter. Meeting Sharon's family. Sharon had warned him ahead of time. You should know something, she said one evening, while they sat outside a small cafe. Nicole looked curious. What's that? My family is enthusiastic. Nicole smiled. That sounds positive. Sharon leaned forward slightly. They will ask you questions. What kind of questions? The kind that make sure you're serious about being around. Nicole laughed softly. I appreciate honesty. Sharon tilted her head. Are you sure? Nicole nodded confidently. I grew up around straightforward people. Sharon smiled. Well then, welcome to Sunday dinner. That Sunday afternoon, Nicole arrived at Sharon's family home just outside Houston. Even before he reached the front door, he could hear laughter coming from inside. The sound of music drifted through an open window. When Sharon opened the door, she looked amused. "You still have time to run," she teased. Nicole shook his head. Too late now. The moment they stepped inside, the room grew louder. Several relatives looked up at once. Sharon's cousins were sitting around a table playing dominoes. One of them glanced at Nicole and grinned. "So this is him." Nicole raised an eyebrow. "I'm guessing my reputation arrived before I did." Another cousin leaned back in his chair. "Oh yeah, Sharon mentioned you." Sharon crossed her arms. "I said exactly 2 sentences." "That's enough," the cousin replied. Nicole chuckled. "Should I be nervous?" One of the cousins slid a domino tile across the table. "Depends. On what?" "Whether you know how to play." Nicole stepped closer. "I've played a few times." The cousin gestured toward an empty chair. "Sit down then." Within minutes, Nicole found himself pulled into the domino game. The table filled with friendly competition. Every move sparked commentary. "You sure that's the tile you want to play? That's a risky move. You're about to regret that decision." Nicole quickly realized something. This wasn't an interrogation. It was a test of personality. Sharon stood nearby watching with quiet amusement. At one point, Nicole placed a tile carefully on the table. One cousin stared at it, then burst out laughing. "Oh no." Another cousin slapped the table. "That's the wrong move." Nicole leaned back slightly. "I had a feeling." Sharon laughed. "You're doing fine." After the domino game ended, dinner began. The dining table filled with homemade dishes. Conversation flowed easily between relatives. Stories were shared. Laughter returned again and again. At one point, Sharon's mother looked directly at Nicole. Her expression wasn't hostile, but it was serious. "So," she said calmly. Nicole met her gaze respectfully. "Yes, ma'am. What are your intentions with my daughter?" The room grew quiet for a moment. Several cousins leaned back, clearly interested in the answer. Nicole didn't hesitate. "My intention is to treat her with respect." Sharon's mother studied him carefully. And to build something meaningful if she allows it." There was another short silence. Then Sharon's mother nodded once. "Good answer." Conversation resumed around the table. Nicole exhaled quietly. Sharon leaned closer. "You survived the interrogation phase." Nicole smiled. "That was the interrogation?" "Oh yes." Nicole glanced around the room. Her cousins were laughing again. Someone restarted the domino game. Music played softly from another room. And in that moment, Nicole realized something important. This wasn't just a family. It was a community, a place filled with warmth, honesty, and shared history. And if Sharon came from this environment, it explained exactly why she carried herself the way she did. As the months passed, Nicole and Sharon's relationship continued growing in the same steady way it had begun. There were no dramatic declarations, no grand displays meant to impress anyone. Instead, their connection developed through small moments that slowly built trust. Nicole often found himself drawn into Sharon's world more and more. He attended family dinners where laughter filled the house long after the plates were cleared. He joined weekend walks through quiet neighborhoods where children played in front yards and neighbors greeted each other from porches. Sometimes he helped Sharon organize community events, quietly observing how easily she connected with people. And every time he spent time around her family, Nicole felt something he hadn't expected when he first started building his company years earlier. Peace. His professional life moved quickly. Meetings, contracts, negotiations, travel schedules. But when he stepped into Sharon's world, everything slowed down. Conversations mattered. People listened to each other, and success was measured less by profit and more by the strength of relationships. Nicole respected that deeply. One evening near the beginning of autumn, Nicole invited Sharon for a drive outside the city. Houston's skyline slowly faded behind them as they followed a quiet highway toward open countryside. The late afternoon sun stretched across the horizon, casting warm light across fields and distant tree lines. Sharon glanced at him curiously from the passenger seat. "You're being mysterious today." Nicole smiled slightly. "Just enjoying the drive." Sharon crossed her arms playfully. "That's not an answer." Nicole kept his eyes on the road. "Sometimes answers take time." Sharon laughed softly. "All right, I'll be patient." After another 15 minutes, Nicole turned down a small rural road and eventually parked near a wide open field. The sky above them had begun shifting into deep shades of orange and gold as the sun lowered toward the horizon. Nicole stepped out of the truck and leaned casually against the side. Sharon joined him a moment later. She looked around, taking in the quiet landscape. "This is beautiful," she said. Nicole nodded. "I come here sometimes when I need to think." Sharon glanced up at him. "You think a lot?" "Running a company tends to create that habit." Sharon leaned back against the hood of the truck beside him. The evening air felt calm. A gentle breeze moved through the tall grass surrounding them. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the sunset together. Nicole finally broke the silence. "You know something?" Sharon turned slightly toward him. "What's that?" Nicole took a slow breath. "I've spent most of my adult life focused on building things. Companies," Sharon said. "Yes." He nodded. "I built systems, teams, partnerships, all kinds of structures designed to grow." Sharon listened quietly. Nicole continued, "But building a life is different from building a business." Sharon raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "In business, you measure progress with numbers. And life?" Nicole looked out at the fading sunlight. "In life, you measure progress by who stands beside you." Sharon studied him for a moment, sensing that something meaningful was coming. Nicole turned toward her fully. "I've accomplished things I once thought would define success." Sharon remained silent, letting him continue. "But none of those accomplishments ever gave me the same feeling I get when I'm with you." Sharon blinked slowly. Nicole reached into his jacket pocket. When he spoke again, his voice carried the same calm sincerity she had noticed the first day they met. "I don't want a perfect life." He paused briefly before continuing. "I want a real one." Sharon felt her breath catch slightly. Nicole opened a small ring box in his hand. The setting sun reflected gently across the surface of the ring. Nicole looked directly at her. "And I want that life with you." The field around them remained quiet, except for the distant sound of wind moving through grass. Sharon stared at the ring for a moment, then back at Nicole. "You planned this entire drive just for this moment?" she asked softly. Nicole smiled. "Guilty." Sharon shook her head slightly in disbelief. "You're a billionaire, and this is your proposal plan?" Nicole chuckled. "Simple works better." Sharon studied him again. Everything about the moment felt genuine. No photographers, no elaborate event. Just the two of them standing under a wide Texas sky. Exactly the kind of moment Sharon valued most. Finally, she smiled. "You better mean what you said." Nicole didn't hesitate. "I do." Sharon nodded slowly. "Then yes." Nicole let out a quiet breath of relief. "Good." Sharon laughed. "That's your reaction?" Nicole slipped the ring onto her finger. "I had confidence in the outcome." Sharon shook her head again, amused. "You're impossible." Nicole leaned back against the truck beside her. For a while they simply watched the last light of the sunset fade beyond the horizon, two people standing quietly together, beginning a future neither of them could fully predict yet, but both of them certain about one thing: they had chosen each other. Marriage changed many things for Sharon and Nicole, but not in the dramatic way people often imagine. Their life together didn't suddenly transform into luxury and extravagance. Yes, Nicole's success allowed them comfort, but the rhythm of their daily life still followed the same values that had shaped both of them long before they met. Evenings were often quiet. Sometimes Nicole returned home late after long meetings, loosening his tie while Sharon asked about his day from the kitchen. Other nights they sat together on the couch talking about plans, ideas, or simply enjoying the rare moments when work was far away. And on Sundays, Sharon still insisted they visit her family. Nicole had learned by now that Sunday dinner was not optional. One evening, about 2 years after their wedding, Sharon sat quietly at the kitchen table staring down at a small object in her hand. The room was quiet, except for the ticking clock on the wall. Nicole walked in a few minutes later carrying his phone and a stack of documents from work. He noticed Sharon immediately. "You look like you're solving a puzzle," he said. Sharon didn't answer right away. She looked up slowly, then she turned the small object toward him. Nicole stepped closer. It took him a second to recognize what he was looking at. Then his eyes widened slightly. "A pregnancy test?" he asked carefully. Sharon nodded once. Nicole looked back at her face. "You're serious?" Sharon smiled softly. Yes. For a moment Nicole said nothing. He simply sat down across from her, processing. Then he leaned forward slightly. So, we're having a baby. Sharon laughed quietly. That's usually what that means. Nicole leaned back in his chair. Well. Sharon raised an eyebrow. Well, what? Nicole shook his head slowly, a small smile forming. Well, that's amazing. Sharon watched the expression on his face carefully. You're not overwhelmed? Nicole considered the question. Maybe a little. He looked around the kitchen as if imagining the future inside the house. But mostly I'm excited. Sharon reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I had a feeling you'd say that. A few weeks later, they attended the doctor's appointment together. The examination room felt calm, filled with the quiet sounds of medical equipment and the gentle hum of air conditioning. Sharon lay back while Nicole sat beside her, watching the monitor with curiosity. The doctor studied the screen for a moment. Then she smiled. Well, she said calmly, I have some news. Nicole leaned forward. Good news, I hope. Oh, it's very good news. Sharon squeezed Nicole's hand instinctively. The doctor turned the screen slightly so they could see more clearly. You're not just expecting one baby. Nicole blinked. Sharon looked confused. What do you mean? The doctor pointed to the image on the screen. 2. For a moment, the room fell silent. Nicole stared at the monitor. Then he blinked again. 2. Sharon looked at the screen, then back at the doctor. You mean twins? The doctor nodded with a smile. That's correct. Nicole leaned back slowly in his chair. Sharon nudged his arm gently. Say something. Nicole rubbed his face, trying to process the information. Then he let out a short laugh. Okay. Sharon waited. Nicole looked at her again. 2 babies. He shook his head again. That's efficient. Sharon burst out laughing. Efficient? Nicole nodded. I'm an entrepreneur. I appreciate productivity. Sharon smacked his arm playfully. You're unbelievable. Despite the surprise, excitement filled the room quickly. The months that followed were filled with preparation. Cribs, tiny clothes, doctor visits. Sharon's family offered advice at every opportunity. Nicole listened carefully, sometimes overwhelmed by how many small details came with preparing for 2 babies instead of 1. When the twins finally arrived, everything changed. Nicole discovered a side of himself he had never experienced before. Late nights became normal. Sleep schedules disappeared. Business meetings were sometimes interrupted by baby monitors. But none of it bothered him. One evening several months later, Sharon stood quietly in the hallway outside the nursery. The soft glow of a lamp illuminated the room inside. Nicole sat in a rocking chair holding one of the babies while the other rested in a small crib nearby. He gently rocked the chair back and forth. The baby in his arms slowly drifted towards sleep. Nicole spoke softly. All right, little one, let's give your mom a peaceful evening. The baby made a tiny sound. Nicole smiled. Sharon leaned against the doorway watching. There was something deeply touching about seeing a man known for leading a billion-dollar company whispering quietly to a child in the middle of the night. Nicole noticed Sharon standing there. You caught me on night duty, he whispered. Sharon smiled warmly. You look good doing it. Nicole glanced down at the sleeping baby. I'm learning. Sharon stepped into the room. You're doing more than learning. Nicole stood carefully and placed the baby back into the crib beside the other. Both babies slept peacefully. Nicole exhaled quietly. Sharon took his hand as they stepped back into the hallway. Life had changed in ways neither of them expected. But the home Sharon always dreamed of, a peaceful place filled with love, was finally becoming real. Before we continue the story, take a moment to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. If family means everything to you, comment family first. Life after the twins arrived did not slow Nicole's professional responsibilities. If anything, the company demanded more of his attention than ever before. The logistics network he had spent years building had expanded far beyond Texas. Contracts now stretched across multiple states, connecting suppliers, distribution centers, and transportation partners into a system that moved enormous volumes of goods every single day. Running that kind of operation required precision. One delayed shipment could affect dozens of businesses. One broken communication channel could disrupt an entire supply chain. Nicole approached the challenge the same way he had approached every stage of his career, carefully, methodically. He reviewed reports personally, held meetings with department leaders, and insisted that every part of the system function with the same reliability he had promised when the company first began. But as the company grew larger, the problems became more complex. More moving parts meant more potential weaknesses. And Nicole understood something important. A strong business was not just built on good ideas. It required people who knew how to solve difficult problems quickly. That was how Lila entered the picture. Nicole first heard about her during a discussion with his operations team. They had been reviewing performance reports when one of the managers mentioned a consultant who specialized in logistics analysis. Her name is Lila, the manager explained. She's worked with several large distribution networks over the past few years. Nicole looked up from the report in front of him. What kind of work does she do? The manager replied without hesitation. She identifies inefficiencies in shipping systems and finds ways to correct them before they become expensive problems. Nicole leaned back slightly in his chair. That sounds useful. She's also known for being thorough, the manager added. Nicole nodded. Set up a meeting. The meeting happened the following week at the company's Houston office. When Lila entered the conference room, Nicole immediately noticed the quiet confidence in the way she carried herself. She wasn't overly formal, but she was organized, prepared, professional. She placed a tablet and several printed documents neatly on the table before the discussion even began. Nicole appreciated that. Preparation mattered. Thank you for coming, Nicole said. Thank you for the opportunity, Lila replied. Her voice carried the calm tone of someone who had spent years presenting complex information to demanding clients. Nicole gestured toward the reports she had brought. Tell me what you found. Lila tapped the screen of her tablet and rotated it so Nicole could see the data. These are your shipping efficiency metrics from the last 12 months. Nicole studied the numbers carefully. And overall performance is strong, Lila said, but there are patterns in your distribution routes that could create delays if they continue. Nicole raised an eyebrow. Show me. For the next 30 minutes, Lila explained the patterns she had discovered. Certain routes were becoming overloaded. Some warehouses were operating close to capacity. A few supplier connections required adjustment to maintain long-term efficiency. Nicole asked detailed questions. Lila answered each one clearly. By the end of the meeting, Nicole reached a simple conclusion. She knew what she was doing. All right, he said finally. I'd like you to work with our operations team for the next few months. Lila nodded. I'd be happy to. Working with Nicole's company meant frequent travel. Some issues required direct observation at different distribution hubs across the country. That meant airports, flights, meetings in unfamiliar cities. Lila handled the travel easily. She had spent years moving between projects. Airports had become routine for her. Nicole respected that level of professionalism. He didn't view Lila as anything beyond what she was hired to be, a skilled consultant helping improve the company's systems. But from the outside, appearances sometimes tell a different story. When two professionals travel frequently together for work, people often notice the situation before they understand it. Nicole rarely paid attention to speculation. His focus remained on solving problems. Still, the travel schedule meant he and Lila occasionally arrived at airports together while heading to the same meetings. And on one particular afternoon in Houston, that ordinary business routine would place them in a moment neither of them expected. Because somewhere else in the airport that same day, Sharon was walking through the terminal with a stroller, and inside that stroller, two small passengers were about to turn an ordinary business trip into something unforgettable. The afternoon at Houston's International Airport was busy in the familiar way large travel hubs always are. Rolling suitcases moved steadily across polished floors. Electronic boards flickered with departure times. Announcements echoed through the terminal as passengers hurried toward security lines. Nicole walked beside Lila through the main concourse with the calm pace of someone used to traveling often. Neither of them rushed. They had arrived early for their flight to Dallas, where a series of meetings waited the next morning. Lila adjusted the strap of her carry-on bag as they approached the security checkpoint. I never get used to airport lines, she admitted. Nicole glanced toward the long line ahead. You travel all the time. That doesn't mean I enjoy the security process, she replied. Nicole smiled slightly. I suppose that's fair. The line moved forward slowly. Travelers removed laptops from bags, placed shoes into plastic bins, and stepped carefully through the scanners while airport staff directed the flow of people. When Nicole and Lila reached the conveyor belt, Lila placed her handbag into one of the gray trays. She hesitated for a moment while adjusting the zipper on her carry-on suitcase. Nicole noticed. "Here," he said casually. He lifted the bag onto the belt and slid it forward toward the scanner. "Thanks," Lila said with a small smile. "Anytime." They stepped through the metal detector one after the other. The machine gave a short beep as a traveler behind them passed through, but Nicole and Lila continued forward without delay. On the other side of the scanner, several trays slowly emerged from the machine. Nicole reached down and pulled Lila's bag off the belt before handing it back to her. "Everything accounted for?" he asked. Lila checked quickly. "Yes, looks like it." Nicole picked up his own laptop bag from the tray beside it. For a moment, the scene looked completely ordinary. Two professionals preparing for a short business trip. No raised voices, no tension, just routine travel. But a few feet away, something small began to draw attention. The soft squeak of stroller wheels rolled across the floor. At first, it blended into the background noise of the airport. Then a tiny giggle followed. The sound was unmistakable. Nicole paused mid-step. His head turned slightly. Another giggle, high-pitched, playful, familiar. Lila continued adjusting the strap of her bag while Nicole slowly looked over his shoulder. And the moment he turned fully around, his expression froze, because walking calmly toward him through the terminal crowd was Sharon. She pushed a stroller with steady hands. Inside the stroller sat two 8-month-old twins kicking their tiny feet happily. The babies were laughing at something only they seemed to understand. Nicole blinked. For a brief second, the noise of the airport seemed to fade behind the shock of the moment. Sharon slowed as she approached. Her posture remained relaxed. Her expression carried a gentle calmness, almost as if this moment had been planned. Nicole stared in disbelief. "Sharon?" Sharon stopped a few steps away. Her smile appeared warm and unhurried. "Hello, sweetheart." Nicole looked from Sharon to the twins, then back again. "What are you doing here?" One of the babies squealed with excitement when they saw him. Tiny hands reached upward from the stroller. Nicole stepped forward instinctively. He leaned down and kissed the baby's forehead. "Well, look at you two," he said softly. The twins giggled again. Behind him, Lila stood quietly holding her bag. Her eyes moved carefully between Nicole and Sharon. She suddenly felt unsure whether to step forward or remain where she was. Nicole straightened and rubbed the back of his neck. "This is unexpected." Sharon tilted her head slightly, still smiling. "You don't like surprises?" Nicole let out a short breath. "I like them when I know they're coming." Sharon chuckled softly. "Well, the twins and I thought we'd brighten your afternoon." The babies continued kicking their feet happily inside the stroller. Nicole looked at them again, his surprise slowly mixing with affection. "You brought them to the airport?" "Of course," Sharon replied calmly. They were curious about where their father disappears to during business trips. A few nearby travelers slowed their steps, sensing the unusual scene. A well-known businessman, a woman beside him holding a travel bag, and his wife standing there with a stroller and two laughing babies. Nicole glanced briefly toward Lila, then back to Sharon. The air around them seemed to hold a quiet tension. Not loud, but noticeable, because from the outside, the moment looked like the beginning of a confrontation, and anyone watching might expect raised voices, sharp questions, or accusations. But Sharon simply rested her hands on the stroller handle and waited calmly. Her eyes moved from Nicole to Lila with quiet curiosity. Nicole realized something quickly. This moment could turn uncomfortable if handled poorly. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could explain anything, the twins burst into another round of giggles. The sound broke the tension just enough to remind everyone that two very small observers were watching the entire moment unfold, and the airport terminal continued buzzing around them as if nothing unusual had happened at all. For a brief moment after Nicole spotted Sharon, the space around them felt suspended in time. Passengers continued walking past with suitcases. Security officers directed travelers toward open lanes. Announcements echoed overhead, but in the small circle formed by Nicole, Sharon, Lila, and the stroller carrying the twins, everything felt unusually still. Nicole stood facing Sharon, still processing the surprise. Sharon rested her hands lightly on the stroller handle, her expression relaxed and warm. There was no tension in her face, No accusation in her voice, only a calm curiosity. Nicole glanced toward Lila, then back at Sharon. "I didn't expect to see you here today," he admitted. Sharon tilted her head slightly. That much was obvious. One of the twins reached toward Nicole again, making a soft sound of excitement. Nicole leaned down and gently lifted the baby into his arms. The tiny fingers immediately grabbed his tie. Nicole laughed quietly. "Strong grip." Sharon smiled. "They've been practicing." Nicole kissed the baby's forehead before placing them carefully back in the stroller. The moment softened the air between them. Sharon's eyes then shifted toward Lila. Her voice remained polite and friendly. "Hello." Lila blinked slightly, surprised by the tone. "Oh, hello." Nicole cleared his throat. "Sharon, this is Lila." He gestured lightly. "She's consulting with the company on a logistics project." Sharon nodded slowly. "It's nice to meet you." She extended her hand. Lila hesitated for half a second before shaking it. "Nice to meet you too." Nicole watched the exchange carefully. But Sharon's body language never changed. Calm, open, confident. Instead of confrontation, the introduction felt respectful. Sharon glanced at the carry-on bag Lila held. "You travel often for work?" Lila nodded. "Quite a bit." Sharon chuckled softly. "That explains why Nicole looked so comfortable helping with your suitcase." Nicole rubbed the back of his neck. "Sharon." But Sharon waved her hand gently. "I'm teasing." Lila laughed quietly, relieved. "I'm grateful for the help, actually." Nicole sighed in mild embarrassment. "Security lines aren't the best place to struggle with luggage." Sharon smiled again. "Well, I'm glad someone was there to help." The twins kicked their feet happily inside the stroller. One of them began babbling as if offering commentary on the conversation. Sharon leaned down and adjusted a small blanket around them. "Looks like someone is excited to see their father." Nicole glanced down at them. "They're growing fast. They keep us busy," Sharon replied. The small group stepped away from the security checkpoint toward a quieter section of the terminal. Nearby, a cafe offered coffee and small meals for travelers waiting to board flights. Nicole pushed the stroller while Sharon walked beside him. Lila followed a few steps behind. They reached an empty table near the cafe windows. Nicole ordered 3 drinks while Sharon bounced one of the babies gently on her knee. Lila sat down across from them, still slightly unsure how the situation would unfold, but Sharon continued the conversation easily. "So, Lila," she said, "what part of logistics consulting do you specialize in?" Lila relaxed slightly. "Mostly system analysis." Sharon nodded. "Making sure companies don't waste money on inefficient routes." "Exactly." Nicole returned with the drinks and placed one in front of Sharon. "Careful," he said. "It's hot." Sharon took a small sip. "Thank you." The conversation flowed naturally for several minutes. They spoke about travel schedules, business operations, and the challenges of managing large distribution systems. Nicole watched Sharon carefully during the discussion. She listened closely to everything Lila explained, asked thoughtful questions, and never once showed discomfort about the situation. But Sharon noticed something quietly. Nicole's voice sounded slightly heavier than usual when discussing work. His answers were shorter, more careful. She had seen that pattern before, not during family dinners, not during quiet evenings at home, but during moments when he carried stress he hadn't shared yet. Sharon rested her hand briefly on Nicole's arm. "You've been traveling a lot lately," she said gently. Nicole glanced at her. "Yes. Work keeping you busy?" Nicole hesitated. "Something like that." Sharon didn't press further. Instead, she nodded slowly. "Just make sure you're taking care of yourself." Nicole offered a small smile. "I will." The twins began giggling again. Nicole leaned down and tickled one of them. The baby laughed loudly. Nearby travelers glanced over, smiling at the scene. A powerful businessman kneeling beside a stroller while 2 tiny babies laughed at his attempts to entertain them. Sharon watched quietly, but inside her mind a thought had already formed. Nicole wasn't just busy. He was worried about something, and whatever that concern was, it hadn't revealed itself yet. But Sharon knew her husband well. Sooner or later, the truth would find its way into the open. The cafe conversation continued for several minutes after the twins finished their small performance of giggles and curious noises. Travelers passed by their table carrying backpacks and rolling luggage toward departure gates. Nicole checked the time on his watch. His flight to Dallas would begin boarding soon. He looked toward Lila. We should probably head to the gate in a few minutes. Lila nodded. Agreed. Sharon watched him carefully. She had seen that look before. Nicole's attention moving back toward responsibility, back toward work. She understood it. Running a company the size of Nicole's required constant attention. But something about the way he carried himself that afternoon still lingered in her mind. There was a quiet weight behind his focus. The twins shifted in the stroller again. One of them reached for Nicole's sleeve. Nicole smiled and gently held the tiny hand. I wish I had more time before the flight, he said. Sharon tilted her head slightly. Who says you don't? Nicole looked confused. What do you mean? Sharon reached down into the large bag hanging from the stroller. She pulled out a small envelope. Nicole frowned. What's that? Sharon slid the envelope across the table toward him. Open it. Nicole raised an eyebrow but followed her instruction. Inside were 2 boarding passes. He stared at them for a moment, then looked up again. Dallas? Sharon nodded calmly. Nicole blinked. You're coming with me? Not just me. She gestured toward the stroller. The twins and I. Nicole leaned back in his chair. You booked tickets? Sharon smiled. Yesterday. Nicole looked down at the boarding passes again, then back at Sharon. You planned this entire surprise? Of course. Nicole shook his head slowly, half amused and half stunned. You brought 2 babies on a business trip. Sharon shrugged playfully. You married me. This is part of the adventure. Lila watched the exchange quietly from across the table. She had expected tension when Sharon first arrived, but instead she was watching something very different. A couple comfortable enough with each other to turn an unexpected airport encounter into a shared trip. Nicole rubbed his forehead with a small laugh. I should have known you were planning something. Sharon leaned closer. You've been working non-stop lately. Nicole opened his mouth to respond, but Sharon continued gently. And the twins missed their father during the week. Nicole looked down at the stroller. One of the babies kicked their feet happily again. Well, Nicole admitted quietly. I didn't expect this. Sharon folded her hands together. Is that a problem? Nicole shook his head. No. He smiled. Just surprising. Lila checked the time on her phone. Boarding should start soon. Nicole nodded. Then we should head over. He stood and took the stroller handle. Looks like we're traveling as a full team today. Sharon laughed softly. That's the idea. They walked together through the terminal toward the gate. Passengers waited in small groups near the boarding counter. Nicole glanced down at the twins. You 2 ready for your first business trip? The babies responded with cheerful babbling. Sharon smiled. They're excellent travel companions. Lila looked at the twins curiously. Do they always have this much energy? Pretty much, Sharon said. Nicole chuckled. They get that from their mother. Sharon nudged his arm. Excuse me? Nicole grinned. Observation, not criticism. Boarding soon began. Passengers lined up according to their group numbers. Nicole helped fold the stroller while Sharon lifted one of the babies into a carrier. Lila waited nearby with her bag. Within minutes they were walking down the jet bridge together. Nicole still felt surprised by the sudden change of plans. But as he glanced back at Sharon and the twins, something about the moment felt comforting. The trip to Dallas was no longer just another business obligation. Now it felt like something else entirely, a journey shared with the people who mattered most. And Sharon suspected that once the plane lifted into the sky, Nicole would finally tell her the truth about the worry she had sensed earlier. The plane lifted smoothly from the runway as the lights of Houston slowly faded beneath the wings. Inside the cabin, passengers settled into their seats while the quiet hum of the engines filled the air. Nicole sat beside Sharon while the twins rested in their carriers between them. One of the babies had already fallen asleep, tiny hands curled gently against the soft blanket Sharon had tucked around them. The other watched the cabin lights with curious eyes before slowly drifting into sleep as well. For the first time since the unexpected reunion in the airport terminal, everything around them grew calm. No rushing travelers, no boarding announcements, just the steady rhythm of the aircraft moving through the evening sky. Sharon glanced toward Nicole. He was staring ahead quietly. The expression on his face confirmed what she had already sensed earlier. Something was weighing on him. She reached over and rested her hand gently on his. "All right," she said softly. Nicole looked at her. "You've been quiet since we boarded." Nicole exhaled slowly. "I'm just thinking." Sharon gave him a small, knowing smile. "That usually means something serious." Nicole looked down briefly before speaking again. "You notice things too easily." "That's part of loving someone," Sharon replied calmly. Nicole leaned back in his seat, rubbing his forehead as if organizing his thoughts. For a moment he watched the sleeping twins. Then he finally spoke. "The company is under investigation." Sharon didn't react with alarm. She simply listened. "What kind of investigation?" she asked. Nicole lowered his voice slightly, mindful of the other passengers nearby. "Federal auditors started reviewing some of our overseas shipping contracts about a month ago." Sharon nodded slowly. "And they found something?" Nicole sighed. "Yes." He turned slightly toward her. "There are irregularities in several of our shipment records." Sharon's expression remained steady. "What kind of irregularities?" Nicole paused before answering. "Financial routing issues, missing documentation, shipments that appear in one system but not in another." Sharon considered the information carefully. "You think someone inside the company caused it?" Nicole nodded. "That's the concern." Sharon folded her hands together. "How much money are we talking about?" Nicole gave a quiet, frustrated laugh. "Enough that the auditors are taking it very seriously." Sharon studied his face. "And you didn't tell me because you didn't want to worry me." Nicole looked slightly embarrassed. "I didn't want to bring work problems home." Sharon squeezed his hand gently. "You never have to protect me from the truth." Nicole looked back at the twins sleeping peacefully beside them. "That's not the hard part." "What is?" Nicole's voice lowered slightly. "Trust." Sharon waited. Nicole continued. "If the investigation confirms what we suspect, someone inside the company manipulated our logistics records." Sharon nodded slowly. "That would mean betrayal." Nicole looked down at his hands. "I built this company around one principle. Integrity," Sharon said quietly. Nicole glanced at her. "Yes." He sighed again. "When you trust people with responsibility, you expect them to protect what you built together." Sharon leaned back slightly in her seat. "But someone may have taken advantage of that trust." Nicole nodded. "That's what it looks like." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the flight attendants began moving quietly through the aisle. Finally, Sharon asked another question. "Is that why Lila is working with you?" Nicole nodded. "Yes. She's investigating the logistics systems?" "Exactly." Nicole explained further. "She specializes in identifying weaknesses in distribution networks, and she's already discovered some of the irregular patterns." Sharon considered the situation carefully. "So the woman people might assume is your traveling companion," Nicole sighed with a small smile, "is actually helping uncover fraud inside the company." Sharon chuckled softly. "That's quite a misunderstanding waiting to happen." Nicole rubbed the back of his neck. "You weren't worried earlier at the airport?" Sharon looked at him with calm confidence. "Nicole, yes? I know my husband." Nicole felt something inside his chest relax slightly. Sharon continued gently. "And I know the difference between business and betrayal." Nicole looked out the window at the dark sky surrounding the aircraft. "Still, this situation could damage the company's reputation." Sharon shook her head. "Only if you ignore it." Nicole looked back at her. "What do you mean?" Sharon smiled softly. "You built something strong." Nicole waited. "Strong things survive problems," she finished. Nicole watched her for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You always make complicated things sound simple." Sharon leaned her head lightly against the seat. "That's because the important parts usually are." Nicole looked at the twins again, and for the first time in weeks, the tension in his shoulders began to ease, because he realized something important. Whatever challenge waited in Dallas, he wasn't facing it alone. The plane landed in Dallas just after sunrise. Through the window, the city slowly came into view as the aircraft ascended toward the runway. Early morning lights stretched across the skyline while highways below carried the steady movement of commuters beginning their day. Inside the cabin, passengers gathered their belongings while the twins stirred softly in their carriers. Nicole carefully lifted one of them while Sharon adjusted the blanket around the other. The baby yawned. Nicole smiled. "Looks like someone slept through their first business flight." Sharon chuckled quietly. They're already professionals. Lila waited in the aisle beside them with her bag, giving the family space as they prepared to exit the plane. When the doors finally opened, the small group stepped into the terminal and made their way toward the baggage area before heading to the hotel where Nicole's meetings were scheduled. Later that morning, the atmosphere inside the conference room felt very different from the warmth of the airport cafe the day before. A long, polished table stretched across the center of the room. Several large monitors displayed spreadsheets and logistics maps filled with shipment data. Nicole sat at the head of the table. Lila stood near the screen holding a digital tablet. Sharon sat quietly toward the side of the room, with the twins resting peacefully in their stroller. Some of the executives attending the meeting glanced curiously at the stroller, clearly surprised to see two babies present during a corporate investigation. But Sharon seemed completely comfortable. She simply watched the discussion unfold. Lila began the presentation. These are the shipping reports we reviewed last week. The screen displayed several charts showing patterns across different logistics routes. Nicole leaned forward. "Walk us through it." Lila nodded. For most of the network, performance remained stable. She tapped the screen, highlighting several lines on the chart. But there are irregularities within a specific set of shipments over the past 6 months. Nicole folded his hands together. Define irregular. Lila switched to the next slide. A list of shipment numbers appeared. These shipments pass through the system with approval signatures that don't match the original authorization records. Nicole frowned. So someone modified the documentation. That's the likely explanation. One of the twins shifted quietly in the stroller. Sharon rocked it gently while continuing to listen. Lila continued explaining the findings. The unusual pattern appears across multiple shipping routes, but there is one consistent detail. Nicole looked at the screen. What detail? Lila enlarged the data on the display. Every one of these shipments passed through the same approval channel inside the company. The room grew quiet. Nicole spoke slowly. "You're saying the problem is internal?" "Yes," Lila nodded. "Someone inside the organization created false approvals." A few executives exchanged uneasy looks. Nicole leaned back slightly. "How many shipments are affected?" Lila answered carefully. "Enough to create several $1 million in misrouted contracts." Nicole exhaled quietly. Sharon watched his reaction. The frustration in his expression was clear. But she also noticed something else. The pattern Lila described felt incomplete. Sharon leaned forward slightly. "May I ask something?" The room turned toward her. Nicole nodded. "Go ahead." Sharon looked at the screen. "These shipments pass through the same approval channel, correct?" Lila confirmed. "Yes." Sharon continued calmly. "And do the dates for those shipments overlap with any major company events?" Lila paused. "What kind of events?" "Large corporate meetings," Sharon said. "Moments when leadership teams gather in one location." Lila began scanning the data again. Her expression changed slightly. Nicole noticed immediately. "What is it?" Lila looked back at the screen carefully. "These shipments appear during the same weeks as our board conference meetings." Nicole leaned forward. "Are you certain?" Lila scrolled through the records again. "Yes." She looked back at Sharon with new interest. Every irregular shipment occurred during weeks when the executive teams were attending conferences. Nicole's eyes narrowed slightly. That means the person responsible had access to the system, while most leadership members were distracted. The room grew silent again. Sharon nodded slowly, which would make those weeks the easiest time to hide unusual activity. Lila turned back to the screen. "That narrows the investigation significantly." Nicole stood up from his chair. "Focus on employees who had authorization access during those conference periods." Lila nodded. "I'll start compiling that list immediately." The executives around the table began discussing the next steps, but Nicole glanced toward Sharon. She was gently rocking the stroller again, as if the meeting had been an ordinary conversation. Nicole walked over quietly. "That was a good observation," he said. Sharon shrugged lightly. "I just asked a question." Nicole smiled. "Sometimes the right question changes everything." The twins stirred softly inside the stroller. One of them made a small sound before falling back asleep. Nicole looked down at them, then back at Sharon, and in that moment he realized something important. The investigation had taken a major step forward, and the person responsible for the hidden fraud inside his company was now much closer to being discovered. The breakthrough in the Dallas conference room changed the direction of the investigation almost immediately. Once Lila isolated the pattern Sharon had identified, the data became far easier to analyze. Instead of searching through thousands of shipments across the entire logistics network, the team now focused on a much smaller window of time. The conference weeks, those periods when senior leadership gathered in one place and normal oversight shifted. Nicole stood near the large screen while Lila continued reviewing the records. She moved quickly through system logs, approval timestamps, and digital authorization trails. The room remained quiet except for the soft tapping of her tablet as she scrolled through the files. Nicole watched the screen carefully. Anything yet? Lila paused. Possibly. She expanded one of the authorization records. A detailed log appeared on the display showing which internal account had approved the suspicious shipments. Nicole stepped closer. That account belongs to the financial control department. Lila nodded. Yes. Nicole folded his arms. That narrows the field. Lila continued scanning through additional records. Every altered shipment was processed using the same authorization credentials. Nicole leaned forward slightly, meaning the same person approved all of them. Exactly. The room fell silent again. Nicole spoke slowly. Pull the access records tied to those credentials. Lila entered another command. Within seconds, the system displayed a series of login timestamps connected to the approvals. Nicole studied them carefully. They all occurred late in the evening. Lila nodded. During the conference events, Nicole exhaled quietly. While everyone else was focused on meetings, Sharon sat quietly beside the stroller, gently rocking it while the twins slept. She listened, but didn't interrupt. Lila opened the final record. There's something else. Nicole looked up. What? These logins originated from the same workstation inside the company's financial department. Nicole stared at the screen. Show me the user identification. Lila tapped the screen once more. The account information appeared clearly on the monitor. Nicole's expression hardened. So it's confirmed. Lila nodded slowly. Yes. Nicole remained silent for a moment before speaking again. Compile the evidence. Lila looked at him. You're going to report it immediately. Nicole answered without hesitation. Yes. The integrity of the company mattered more than avoiding public attention. Within hours, the documentation was organized and sent to the appropriate authorities handling the audit. The evidence showed a clear pattern. Unauthorized approvals, manipulated shipment records, financial rerouting tied directly to the same internal authorization account. Later that evening, Nicole received confirmation that investigators had begun their formal review of the material. The investigation moved quickly once the evidence was verified. The fraudulent activity had been carefully hidden for months, but the pattern Sharon identified exposed the system that allowed it to continue. By the following afternoon, the authorities contacted Nicole again. The person responsible had been identified and removed from their position while the investigation continued. Nicole stood quietly near the hotel window after receiving the call. Dallas traffic moved steadily along the streets below. Behind him, Sharon entered the room carrying one of the twins. Everything all right? She asked. Nicole turned toward her. Yes. He paused before continuing. They confirmed the evidence. Sharon nodded slowly. And Nicole allowed himself a small breath of relief. The person responsible has been removed from the company. Sharon walked closer. That must feel like a weight lifted. Nicole looked out the window again. It does. For weeks, the uncertainty had followed him everywhere. Every meeting, every report, every late-night review of company data. Now the truth had finally come to light. Nicole looked back at Sharon. You helped start the chain of questions that exposed it. Sharon smiled gently. I only asked about the timing. Nicole shook his head slightly. Sometimes the right question changes everything. The twins made small, sleepy sounds in Sharon's arms. Nicole stepped closer and gently touched one tiny hand. The baby squeezed his finger instinctively. Nicole smiled. The company he built had faced a serious test, but the truth had prevailed. And for the first time since the investigation began, Nicole felt the quiet certainty that everything was moving back into the right direction. The following morning in Dallas felt noticeably calmer. The urgency that had filled the previous days was gone. Nicole woke early in the hotel room while soft sunlight filtered through the curtains. For a few moments he simply sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the room. One of the twins stirred gently in the portable crib nearby. Nicole stood and walked over, resting his hand lightly on the side. The baby blinked slowly before recognizing him and reaching upward. Nicole smiled. "Good morning." The tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb. It was a simple moment, but after weeks of pressure and uncertainty, the quiet felt almost unfamiliar. Behind him, Sharon sat up and watched the scene. "You're awake early," she said softly. Nicole turned slightly. Habit. Sharon leaned back against the pillows. Or maybe relief. Nicole considered that. Maybe both. He gently lifted the baby and rocked them slowly while pacing near the window. Outside, Dallas traffic moved through the streets below. Business continued as usual. Contracts would still need attention. Meetings would still fill his schedule. But something inside Nicole felt different. Sharon noticed it. "You look lighter today," she said. Nicole nodded slightly. "I do." He looked down at the baby in his arms. "For a while I felt like everything I built might be slipping out of my control." Sharon listened quietly. Nicole continued. "When you spend years building something, you start believing you can manage every part of it." Sharon tilted her head. "And the investigation reminded you that's not always true." Nicole gave a small smile. "Yes." He gently placed the baby back into the crib beside the twin. Both babies soon drifted back into sleep. Nicole returned to the chair beside the bed. "You know what surprised me most about this entire situation?" Sharon waited. "The moment I saw you at the airport." Sharon laughed softly. "That surprised you?" Nicole nodded. "I thought I was walking into a complicated conversation." Sharon raised an eyebrow playfully. "And instead?" Nicole leaned back in the chair. "Instead, you joined the trip." Sharon smiled. "Well, someone had to keep you company." Nicole shook his head slightly, still amused. That moment changed the entire tone of the week. Sharon studied him. "How so?" Nicole spoke carefully. "If you had reacted differently, the situation could have turned into something stressful very quickly." Sharon shrugged lightly. "I trust you." Nicole looked at her, and that trust made everything easier. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet in the room felt peaceful. Nicole continued after a pause. "I've spent most of my life measuring success by growth." Sharon listened. Revenue numbers, company expansion, market influence. He glanced toward the sleeping twins. "But sitting here right now," Sharon finished the thought gently, "you're measuring something different." Nicole nodded. "Yes." He stood and walked toward the window again. "When the investigation started, I thought the biggest risk was financial damage." Sharon joined him. "And now?" Nicole looked down at the city below. "Now I realize something else matters more." Sharon folded her arms lightly. "What's that?" Nicole turned toward her. "Who stands beside you when things become uncertain?" Sharon smiled softly. "You always had people beside you." Nicole nodded toward the cribs. "I know." He looked at the twins again. "They remind me why I worked so hard in the first place." Sharon reached for his hand. Nicole squeezed it gently. The stress of the investigation had tested more than the company's systems. It had tested trust, but the experience had also clarified something important. The most valuable parts of Nicole's life had nothing to do with contracts or financial reports. They were standing right there in the room with him, and that realization would stay with him long after the investigation faded into the past. A week later, life in Texas returned to its familiar rhythm. The flight back from Dallas had been calm. The investigation continued through official channels, but Nicole's direct involvement had mostly ended once the evidence was delivered. For the first time in weeks, his mind felt clear again. Late Sunday afternoon sunlight stretched across Sharon's family neighborhood, just outside Houston. The same quiet streets, the same warm breeze moving through the trees. And once again, Sharon's family home was filled with the familiar sounds of laughter and conversation. Nicole stood near the backyard grill beside Sharon's cousins. One of them flipped burgers while another adjusted the music playing from a small speaker sitting on the patio table. "Careful with that," one cousin joked while pointing at the grill. "You're going to burn the whole thing." Nicole raised an eyebrow. "I've handled larger responsibilities than burgers." Another cousin laughed. "Running $1 billion company doesn't qualify you for barbecue duty." Nicole smiled. "Fair enough." Nearby, several children chased each other across the yard while the twins rested on a large blanket spread across the grass. They had discovered the fascinating art of crawling, which meant they spent most of their time exploring everything within reach. Sharon sat beside them, watching carefully as they moved across the blanket. One of the twins reached toward a toy and rolled onto their side. Sharon clapped softly. "Well done." Nicole walked over and crouched beside the blanket. "Looks like someone is becoming mobile." Sharon nodded. "That means we're about to lose control of the living room." Nicole laughed quietly. "That sounds accurate." The twins babbled happily as Nicole tickled one tiny foot. Music continued drifting across the backyard while family members talked nearby. The smell of barbecue filled the air. It felt exactly like the Sundays Sharon had described years earlier. Nicole leaned back on the grass beside Sharon. "You know something?" Sharon looked at him. "What?" "If someone had told me a few years ago that this would be my favorite place to spend a Sunday afternoon." He gestured toward the backyard filled with family. "I might not have believed them." Sharon smiled. "You're saying you enjoy it?" Nicole nodded. "Very much." He watched the twins crawl slowly across the blanket. "For a long time I thought success was measured by numbers." Sharon listened quietly. Nicole continued. "Company growth, investments, expansion into new markets." Sharon tilted her head slightly. "And now?" Nicole looked around the yard, at the cousins laughing near the grill, at the children running across the grass, at Sharon sitting beside him, with the twins between them. "Now I think success looks more like this." Sharon reached for his hand. "I'm glad you figured that out." Nicole squeezed her hand gently. "Me too." The sun slowly dipped toward the horizon, casting long golden light across the neighborhood. Music played softly. Family conversations continued, and the twins eventually grew tired from their adventures on the blanket. Nicole picked one up while Sharon lifted the other. The babies rested comfortably against their shoulders. Nicole looked down at the tiny face leaning against him. "You two changed everything," he said quietly. Sharon smiled. "That tends to happen." Nicole laughed softly. They walked toward the porch where several chairs faced the quiet street. For a while they simply sat together, watching the evening settle over the neighborhood. Peaceful, uncomplicated, real. And sometimes the most meaningful moments in life look exactly like that. Just people sitting together at the end of a long day, grateful for what they have. From the outside, someone watching that airport moment might have expected anger, suspicion, or confrontation. But what they would have missed is the truth that strong relationships are built long before difficult moments appear. Trust is built slowly, patience grows over time, and when those foundations are strong enough, even unexpected situations can lead to deeper understanding. Before we close this story, I want to ask you something. If you had seen that moment in the airport terminal, a billionaire helping another woman through security while his wife approached with twins, what would you have thought? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy stories that remind us what really matters in life, don't forget to like and subscribe to Mr. Gray Stories, because sometimes the most powerful lessons come from moments that look ordinary at first glance. And sometimes, the real success story is simply the people who stand beside you when life becomes uncertain.